And baby, I'm TFC till I die.
Hello and welcome back to Toronto Till I Die, the Toronto FC fan show. I'm Mike Newell, and ready or not, the Toronto FC 2024 season starts on Sunday. Either that thought fills you with hope and excitement for a new season, or existential dread and the earned pessimism and the tough skin of a rhino. Either way, we're diving in on all things TFC going into the season, roster updates, preseason thoughts. You know, have they done enough to be ready for the start of the 2024 season? We get some expert opinions from John Molinaro and MLS Armchair. Yeah, I know. Welcome back, Greg. And some expert opinions from MLS Armchair analyst Matt Doyle, plus the TTID crew, us, give you our 2024 table predictions for the team. So much to get into this week, so let's not waste any time with my co-hosts Michael Singh and Jeffrey P. Nesker. Gentlemen, how are you doing? Are you ready? Are you ready for TFC season, not quite eve, but close enough?
Well, first, Jeff, shout out for the new backdrop. I just noticed when I came in. I'm like, is something off? Am I missing something?
Windows XP, baby.
Jeff on the ball.
Yeah,
with the Windows XP.
I am on the ball. And it's funny. This is like the first one you've produced in weeks, and I forgot to take all the faff from the podcast off there. So I like watched the gears working, trying to figure out where the intro is. I'm sorry about
my
that,
toes there.
Yeah.
You know what's funny about this off season? It's felt like it's gone by super, super quickly from like a Toronto FC perspective, and I can't figure out if it's because we're just not that excited about, you know, the start of the season given the way that the club ended last year and how there's not been many changes, or just because of that, because there hasn't been many moves and we're still waiting for moves to happen. So I still feel like we're kind of in off-season mode, but yet, you know, 3 days from now the season kicks off. I don't know, I just feel like I blinked and missed it.
I got
Aaron Long season, baby.
I got heart palpitations when you said 3 days away from the start of the season. I'm like, I don't know.
Never tell me the odds. Yeah,
I don't know if they're ready, but we're going to find out soon enough. Gents, why don't we just jump right into it? Because we got a lot to get into, and we got a really special guest. Let's bring in MLS armchair analyst, expert. You know him, you love him. It's Matt Doyle. Matt, how you doing? Welcome to Toronto Till I Die.
Yeah, it's nice to finally be on, guys. It's good to see you all over StreamYard here and ready for the season to begin.
Yeah, Matt, it's interesting. I don't think it's lost on anybody how poor TFC season was last year and how poor, you know, the team has been over the last 3 seasons, really since the end of the Greg Vanney era in Toronto. And one of the things that I'm always interested in when bringing on guests that are outside of the Toronto bubble is sort of what is now the perception of Toronto FC in sort of the MLS world, sort of outside our bubble. Because look, in Toronto, we micro scrutinize this team on every little nook and cranny, but I wonder what the MLS world is thinking of the club, really, not just last season, but in the preceding seasons before that.
I think going into last season, there was real optimism because we didn't know how ridiculous the Italian DPs would be. I think everybody kind of thought they would live up to their talent, at least come close to it. And, you know, Bob Bradley did not cover himself in glory in Toronto, but he has a lot of equity justifiably with fans. So I think after 2022, there was an expectation that it would all sort of come together. I mean, I'm still a little bit shocked at how badly it all fell apart, but there's certainly been a lot of reporting as to the why and the how. And where does that leave us now in terms of what do people outside of Toronto think of Toronto FC? The same thing we thought of Toronto FC before the Greg Vanney era, which was, wow, these guys spend a lot of money and have no idea how to put together a team. They're probably going to be really bad.
I think, yeah. I mean that's fair, right? Given
Yeah.
what this team has spent, given the results, given as you alluded to there, Matt, like everything that's gone on kind of behind the scenes. The one thing that has changed for TFC this offseason, biggest change obviously is John Herdman. The roster for the most part has stayed intact, right? We've only 3 additions to this Toronto FC team from last year. None of those additions really jump off the page. So really all eyes will be on John Herdman here. So I guess my question, to you is how much of a difference can a head coach and a new tactics, new system, how much of a difference can that make? Is there a world here where, same roster and essentially John Herman turns this ship around?
Do you guys remember how many changes Cincinnati made when Pat Noonan and Chris Albright came in?
Yeah.
It wasn't a lot. It was not a lot. And that was a team that had won, quote unquote, the wooden spoon 3 years in a row. And they did make, I think, more changes than Toronto have made this offseason. But they didn't say we need to tear this down. There's no talent here. They said we need to work better with what the talent we have, with what they can do. So tactically, there were obviously some changes. Like the first thing they did was show Lucho Acosta some video and be like, you're dropping 70 yards deep to get the ball. We don't want you to do that. You're one of the best number 10s in the league. We want you picking up the ball in the attacking third. So those, some tactical changes, a couple of personnel changes, and really vibes changes, man. Like getting some professionalism in the front office, in the locker room. I love writing about tactics. I love thinking about tactics. That's how I see the game. But give me a team with mediocre tactics that everybody in that locker room is bought into, and I would take that over a team with A+ tactics but mediocre buy-in any day.
Ooh,
so this is like this season is just it's not just, but it's largely a question of like how good can John Herdman do in terms of repairing the emotional infrastructure of that locker room, because there are a lot of players on that roster who can play the game, and they haven't shown it for the last 2 years. And I don't think it's because the tactics were bad. I think it's because the players were not bought in at all.
For sure. And I guess, yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, go ahead. I was gonna
ask you, it's interesting because John Herdman talked a lot about that sort of emotional sports trauma that the team had gone through last season.
That's the word he used.
Exactly. Yeah. And trying to solve that. So it will be interesting to see just out of that if they can find some, some just improvements just from simply that. Because this team defensively before Bob Bradley left wasn't exactly that bad. They weren't great, but they weren't that bad. The wheels fell off after he left, and for a lot of different reasons. But I wonder if they can get a little bit of that back. And this corner leads into sort of another question here. Jeff, I think this was yours, but if you don't mind, I may just jump in on this one.
Stealing my questions is a part of our heritage, guys.
Yeah, I know. Outside of the 2 DPs, who needs to have a big season for this not to turn into back-to-back wooden spoons?
Everybody up the spine, right? The answer is whoever happens to be the starting center backs. And do we know officially whether it's going to be a back 4 or a back 5?
I think
we haven't seen preseason.
It's going to be a back 3, just based on his comments. Like John Herman is a big fan of the back 3. Again, do they have the personnel to roll out a back 3? That's a completely different question.
Right.
They seem to be shopping pretty heavily right now. I mean, that there's a definite need. Yeah.
Yeah, so if it's a back 3, then it's the 3 center backs and Sean Johnson, and I guess Davy Flores is probably the starting defensive midfielder. Yeah. If those guys all, hit adequate levels, then the season will probably be not a complete disaster. You probably won't have the number 2 overall draft pick next year because San Diego's going to have the number 1 pick. But you get my point, right? Like if you have that foundational defense, then that allows you to figure out a lot of stuff with who's going to be doing the attacking without necessarily shooting yourself in the foot. But it's just such a massive if, because none of the names on that depth chart at center back really jump out at you at all as like the type of guys who you would say is a, no doubt about it, starter on a playoff team. So it could, I could be wrong about that. John Herdman could work wonders with this group. But I picked this team to win another wooden spoon. I am far from the only one in the MLS media sphere to have done that. There's going to be a lot of, let's see how it goes as people assess TFC.
When would you push the panic button? I mean, I've read your columns. It seems like you're pushing it already, but reset the clock. When should we start tearing our hair out this coming season?
Well, I'm an old Metro Stars fan, and this happened in 1999. So,
that's so Metro.
I would not bother taking the panic button out of the bubble wrap for 2024. I just don't think that is the game you guys are playing this year. If you were trying to compete, there would have been more moves in the off season. So I think 2024 is as much a teardown year as it is a build-up year. The things I would be interested in are the development of the young players. Shaquille Marshall-Ruddy, DeAndre Kerr, I thought was kind of a silver lining last year. Kosi Thompson. I'm sure that there are kids that I don't even know about who might end up
Alonzo Cuejo
this season. There you go. Alonzo, well, he's not really a kid anymore, right? He's 25.
Yeah, that's true.
Savanovic, maybe Savanovic if they give him minutes.
So it's like that. To me, that's the measure of success for Toronto FC this year. It's like, okay, can we develop some sort of tactical infrastructure and identity? Yes. Can we develop some of our young players? Yes. Okay. Let's think about 2 or 3 transfer windows from now, what we're going to want to build around that. And to bring it back to the Cincinnati thing, like Cincinnati ended up, I think, winning the Supporters Shield last year, a year ahead of schedule. That was year 2 of the Albright Noonan rebuild. But the first year was about just being pretty decent. Now, I think they were ahead of schedule on that as well because they actually made the playoffs. But getting like the first half of that year, they were just like figuring stuff out. And I think that is what Toronto what the fans, I think, are probably going to have to, even though I doubt anyone in the front office or the coaching staff will say it, but like that's what they're going to have to accept for this half season. Because if you look at it, there's not a lot of guys on this team who you would say are like playoff starters.
It's really funny that you keep pointing to Yeah, it's really funny they keep pointing to FC Cincinnati because that's who John Herdman came in right away and kind of signaled as sort of the team that they wanted to become. That's a team that they studied very closely, and it's also going to be their opponents on Sunday nonetheless, so the parallels are endless there. It'd be great if TFC can find a way to kind of emulate that success. I'm with you. I think we got to temper expectations this season. It'd be honestly, again, I think we're playing with house money this year. If TFC end up, making a run, getting into the playoffs, that is an absolute win for this team. But the bigger picture is kind of hitting that reset button altogether, which they haven't done a good enough job of, I think, this offseason when it comes to, resetting a lot of the culture and whatnot.
And it surprised me, but I think that's a kind of a message from ownership to the front office that you're not just going to get an endless amount of cash to buy your 100%. Way out of the mistakes that you've made in putting this together. So, looking at that and understanding that the East is a bloodbath this year, like I did my power rankings, 8 of the top 10 teams are in the East. And I'm not even counting NYCFC, who spent $20 million over the past 2 transfer windows, right? That might be a 10th place team in the Eastern Conference. So looking at that, like my mantra would be 40 points and 2 kids developed. Like that's a win for 2024 as far as I'm concerned.
Orange slices at halftime. Everybody have some fun up there, essentially.
There it is. Just speaking of kids being developed, first overall pick, obviously Tyrese Spicer joining Toronto FC. Now, traditionally in sports and North American sports, we hear first overall pick and we're like, dang, this guy's going to be, a franchise player. He's going to be a difference maker. MLS is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
That said, Toronto FC went after a player who was close to being an impact-ready player, an MLS-ready player. They went for a player who's 23 years of age. What's a reasonable expectation for Tyrese Spicer this year? Are we thinking 1,500, 2,000 minutes? Is that excessive? What are we thinking for Tyrese Spicer?
I mean, I would be hoping 2,000 minutes across all competitions.
Wow.
Yeah. And like, if he's not getting that, then what are you doing? Like we see every year that there are good players who come out of the draft, and if you are eschewing a younger talent who might take a little bit longer to develop for a 23-year-old who is Trinidadian, so he takes up an international roster slot as well, you better have a plan for this kid to play a lot of minutes. And given that it seems likely that it's going to be a 3-5-2 or maybe a 3-4-2-1, Spicer's best fit is probably as an attacking left wing back, sort of like poor man's Alphonso Davies, a player that obviously John Herdman is very familiar with. So the hope is that he can win that job and learn on that job and be productive and be a clear foundational part of this next era of Toronto FC. And I'm not going to say it's a failure if he doesn't hit all those boxes, but I would be disappointed. Toronto's not in a position to whiff on a draft pick of that magnitude, man. Like, you guys had to get it right.
Yeah, and they passed on Kamani Stewart-Baines, a young Canadian kid right in your backyard who was, a couple years younger, that might have been more in line with kind of where they are as a club in terms of development, but yet they take a bit of a gamble, like you said, international roster spot, pre-signed senior, 23 years old, and they kind of go for a pick that not a lot of people had on their radar. So it'll be interesting to see if he can slot in and become a starter right away, because I think that's the expectation here in Toronto based on where the club's at.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got one question in, speaking of kids, from Paul on Twitter, who just wanted to ask you, Matt, specifically about Jaquil Marshall-Rutty. This is the ongoing saga of a young player who we're waiting for that player to be that kid, and it just hasn't happened quite yet. But he's asking, positionally, where do you think the best or ideal fit for him to thrive is, based on what you've seen so far? Does he fit a more central role, or is he still staying out wide at one of the wingback roles?
I mean, everything I've seen, it seems to suggest that he's more comfortable out wide than centrally. But I thought that about Mark Anthony Kaye at the same age, and we know how his career has developed. Look, if they play with wingbacks, I'm of the opinion that more MLS teams, more teams outside of the Big Five in Europe, really should be playing with wingbacks in a back three or a back five rather than a 4-4-2, because I think wingers are really, really tough to come by on a budget. Those are the types of guys who end up in big teams in the Big Five league, because you have to be, dynamic 1v1 and smart off the ball, and you have to be goal dangerous, and you have to hit the last pass, and you have to be very quick and very fast. And like, oh yeah, think about all those boxes you're checking. Those are the types of players that Arsenal go out and buy. So there's not a lot of wingers to go around, and it's a hard job to do when you're learning the game. Whereas wingbacks, because of the nature of literally the shape of the formation, they get sort of a running start when they're attacking space or they're attacking a stranded, isolated defender. I think it is, in that sense, it is an easier job to do mentally. It's maybe a little bit tougher physically because you have to go end line to end line, but he's 19. So you would hope that he has the endurance to go end line to end line, given where he is in his career. So I'm bullish on Jaquil Marshall-Rutty as a fullback, as an attacking fullback. And I think that what Cincinnati, another parallel that we're going to draw, what they've done with their wingbacks the past couple of years, what Wilfried Nancy did with the wingbacks in Columbus, going like all out attack with those positions, I think that could suit a young kid very well, especially because, look, he's going to end up out of position a few times. Like it's the nature of being a young soccer player. You're out of position, you have 3 center backs behind you.
Mhm.
That's just, it's literally 50% more padding than if you're trying to learn fullback in a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We've got big hopes for the kid, and we consistently remind ourselves that he's 19 years old because it seems like we've been talking about his potential for 6 decades, and it's just not the case. I just did 2.5 hours on kits last night, so I'm gonna bring it to kits. Favorite kit of the 2024 drop, and then favorite kit MLS kit of all time.
The Charlie Browns. Like those are instantly iconic for Columbus, and I'm not sure they meant it, but as soon as everybody saw it, they're like, "Oh, good!
I love it.
What a great kit!"
Yeah.
Those are great. The other ones that really caught my eye, I thought the gold pinstripes for LAFC were excellent.
So sharp,
really, and the Sounders. It's a little bit busy, maybe Seattle's, but like I like the color scheme, and then Sporting Kansas City bringing the Argyle.
There
back.
we go.
Yeah.
There we go. My God, I may buy it. I may buy it. Yeah.
They should never have a year in which they don't have an Argyle kit. Like that has to be their brand.
So disgustingly stupid. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's so
what
good.
about the Vancouver kit? The blue guy.
I was disappointed in that. So I think the traditional Vancouver kit with the dark blue and the white stripe, the hoop and the dark blue. I think those are some of the best long-standing kits in MLS, and it's like, it's like the Celtics. Like you just can't beat the green and the white. Like, okay, you might want to do some fun stuff, but like you shouldn't because you have like a perfect looking uniform. So I was a little disappointed with Vancouver's, but hopefully they'll revert back. As for all time, I'm going to go deep cut. The Colorado Rapids 2016 Centennial kits.
I thought you were going to go Colorado Caribous. I thought you were going to just bring an ASL and be like, I'm all about suede tassels, man. Like I need the suede tassels.
If you could combine those two, but no, the Centennial kits for the Rapids. Those were 8 years ago now. Those were sharp.
It's such a good colorway. Yeah.
Did we just learn Doyle's a low-key kit nerd as well, Jeff?
I'm actually not, but like I get asked this so often, I have to have opinions on it.
The Orlando kit is unbelievable. That collar is stupid, and the San Jose Earthquakes, it looks like an old NASL kit from the 80s. Like
I think that's what they were doing.
Yeah, it's their old logo. It's their old logo.
Yeah, it's I mean, why did we get saddled with the FTC logo when everybody else that's doing an alternate badge gets to like break out the Vancouver 86ers and
Are you guys ready for a new logo? Is that what I'm hearing here?
No, I love our badge. I absolutely love our traditional badge, but that alternate badge is boy howdy. Yeah, the less I say about that,
I don't mind it as much. I'm not offended by this.
Do you remember what it looks like this year? Do you know the TFC kit this year? The white and red.
I saw it. It didn't leave an impression on me at all.
That old thing.
Windows XP Saber in the background there.
It's terrible. Yeah, it's no good.
It's kind of a mess. That's a miss. But I thought, by and large, look, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I think everybody was like white home kits and like gray away kits. The league had like the worst color palette in the entire world. By and large, it's come a long way since then. I thought it was a pretty good drop this year. But again, I'm not a kit nerd. Even though I'm playing one on TV right now.
I mean, you've convinced me. I could make an argument that you are one. I'm out of questions, guys. I got my kit one.
One more for you, Matt. You kind of already alluded to this answer, but we will ask just for officially on the record, on this podcast at least. Prediction on where TFC finish.
Don't make him say it again. We heard him.
I know, but just you got to rubber stamp it.
The rubber stamp is I picked them to win the wooden spoon. I will say it can still be a successful year if you win the wooden spoon, as long as guys like Marshall Ruddy and Spicer and Kerr and maybe a young central midfielder as well, as long as you get some development and you get some momentum from that heading into 2025, points are immaterial, really are.
Well, tell that to TFC land. we're gonna clip that and use it as a mantra. Just listen to what Matt Doyle said when you're screaming from the mountaintops about
there should be a top and we should be winning the shield.
Yeah.
What's going on? Well,
We
Matt,
went that
go
we went that
ahead.
whole segment without asking about some Insigne and Bernardeschi, which I appreciate because I'm sure
Yeah,
we
like what's
done
more
over
to say? We've said
What
I
so
mean,
more
much
can
about
you
it.
say?
Yeah.
Like,
like
yeah.
the thing is, like they're talented enough to make all of us eat our words.
Yeah.
And that would be a hell of a story. Let's see it
It
happen.
would. Yeah.
If
Really.
if Herdman turns them around in 1 year, he's not long for a TFC job. Like he'll get the job that he wants in the Prem, because that is an unbelievable achievement for a gaffer. So, we could be lamenting the fact that he turned the tides with them.
Jeff is way out over his skis here.
Yeah, well, hey, look, I don't think Eddie Howe's going anywhere at Newcastle,
Mm.
and look, everybody kind of knows the John Herman mo. He might be here for a good time, not exactly the longest time in the world,
Ooh,
as he's
love it.
looking to climb sort of his professional ladder. But Matt, we really appreciate you taking the time to jump on tonight and talk a little TFC with us. You're welcome back anytime. Good
Anytime.
luck on the rest of the season on Apple and on MLSsoccer.com. We really, again, appreciate the time.
Appreciate it,
Yeah,
boys.
thank
Talk
you so
soon.
much.
Right. Take care.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Okay.
That was
Wow, man.
Matt Doyle, senior analyst
That was awesome.
and armchair analyst on MLSsoccer.com and on Apple. And you can find him everywhere. He's literally everywhere.
Armchair analyst. Great columns. Unbelievable
Absolutely,
insight.
absolutely.
Mhm.
No, that was interesting, guys, because I think he's a lot of things that we talk about on this podcast, but maybe it's not a common tone. It's just to maybe pump the brakes on the 2024 expectations, because we probably are in for a long season.
Yeah, he
Oh, yeah.
did raise an interesting point about, the kids and how that could potentially be one of the focuses of Toronto FC this season. That could be one of their, KPIs and measures of success is how, how do the kids come along? How does John Herman develop them differently than some of the others? Go ahead, Jeff.
What's a KPI?
Key performance indicator.
Oh, okay, cool. Nice. I'm writing that one down. I'm going to use that like for the next week and a half.
Very corporate
with me,
speak.
I say.
That's very, very corporate speak.
Cool. You want me to bust out video codecs?
Yeah,
and
we'll-
confuse
we'll-
the hell out of you? Like, let's go.
Game on.
Yeah. Well, look, I think we're gonna spend a little time talking about diving a little bit deep into roster stuff, into sort of our thoughts on preseason. But if he is available, if he is here, then let's
He's
bring
here.
him in. The one and only John Molinaro, chief editor and founder of TFC Republic. John, welcome back to Toronto Till I Die. Really appreciate again the time for coming on and sort of talking. 3 days away, as Mike kind of said, and I don't know if that gives you the same heart palpitations it gives me, but I wanted to get your thoughts just overall before we sort of start diving deep into TFC, but just more on the, where you think this club is kind of at going into the first game of the season.
I think if this is the roster that is going to pretty much be the status quo for the season, and you would expect changes to come, right? You would expect at some point Jason Hernandez is going to hopefully make the upgrades that the team badly needs at the forward, and I would suggest at the center back position. But I think as is, I don't think there's much reason for optimism. Now, maybe they don't get the wooden spoon, and maybe they kind of move up a couple places, but this is essentially the same team as it was last year. It's the same team that scored 26 goals, which was tied for the worst offensive record in the league. It's the same team that conceded 59 times, which was the second worst defensive record in the league. So, what are we talking about here? We're talking about a team with essentially the same roster going into a new season with a new coach. And I appreciate John Herman's track record of being the master motivator and being able to change cultures. But, this is quite a task for him with essentially, the same roster as last season that, it was the worst season campaign in franchise history. So, unless, as I said, the team can make some serious upgrades during the MLS, the primary transfer window, and I think it's going to go into the summer transfer window, I don't think TFC fans should be very hopeful for any kind of success this year.
Yep, that's the MO. Hey, JMO, how you doing?
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Mhm.
Thanks for joining us. I was telling these guys that I blinked and all of a sudden the offseason has kind of passed us for TFC, with kind of the lack of moves that you were touching on, alluding to there. It does sound like there will be a couple more moves coming in, fairly shortly. But overall, like, are you surprised by the lack of movement overall when it comes to, Toronto FC's offseason?
No.
No.
This is the situation that the club is in. They had, I think, when they made sort of the end of season roster moves, it was essentially 25 or 26 players who were contractually guaranteed for 2024. So, moving realistic, and they were capped out in terms of their international roster slots. So realistically, they had to move players out. They have to move players out before they can sort of bring players in. So, it was always going to be a difficult situation for GM Jason Hernandez. When I say capped out at international spots, obviously Debbie Flores was one and Tyrese Spicer, but pretty much capped out, right? But the point is, like, they would have to move bodies out, and they haven't been able to do that. And I think the bottom line is this: this used to be a team where players from around the league wanted to come to play with, right? I mean, Toronto FC was the envy of the world, and you talk to players around the league, they would have given you their right hand, ripped it off to play for TFC. That's no longer the case. I mean, just in terms of results on the field the last 3 years, but especially, all the behind the scenes stuff that went on last year. And I don't want to bring all that up again, because I think it's been well reported and documented, but that's the position that TFC finds itself in. It's aside from the roster issues that it had with so many guys under contract, people don't want to come here like they once did. And so I think that's sort of the struggle that Jason Hernandez has found himself in right now, is that just getting players here isn't as easy as it once was when they were winning an MLS Cup and they were amongst the best teams in the world. Those days are long gone, and any goodwill that TFC had has long been spent. So I think that's just the reality of the situation. So when we talk about, am I surprised about, the lack of movement this offseason? No, not at all. I mean, it's exactly what I thought it would be.
It's funny. The number of players Toronto FC signed MLS free agents, 0.
Right.
And John, you were in that, media call, I'm sure, beginning of the offseason. I think Jason Hernandez said he was going to be a bit aggressive in the market. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but he was definitely going to target, some high profile MLS free agents. And here we are a couple days before the season and 0 MLS free agents. So I think that's a good indicator of, at least from an MLS perspective, how players around the league are perceiving Toronto FC right now. They're coming off their worst year from a PR standpoint, arguably ever.
And
given
that's
where they
saying
were.
something about
inarguable. Yeah, inarguable.
But that's saying something, right? Like,
Exactly.
we know what this team was prior to the golden era, right? And to say that it's worse than that, yeesh,
we had money and potential. Right now we've got money, less money, and bad vibes. It's easy arithmetic for me.
Yeah, but I wonder, like, in John, just where Matt Doyle was on just before you came on, and we talked about sort of the potential for some type of silver lining in the series could be like, look, just bringing in some good vibes, from John Herdman, from the coaching staff. They're preaching that during preseason, and how, the connections are good and the players are starting to buy into one another. Maybe try to give some TFC fans some hope here in terms of, can that be something that might, give us a glimmer? I'm not talking playoffs, but, could that be a glimmer or something that could maybe move the needle in terms of results for this team?
I mean, possibly. I mean, I think, if they can have a couple players, like youngsters, have a season like the one that Kobe Franklin had last year, where he was, I think, for me, and it's just sort of tells you about how stark the situation was probably TFC's most consistent and best player last year. If they can have a player like, a couple players come along and who kind of had breakout seasons like that, if Alonso Coelho can sort of continue to sort of show, the glimpses of what we saw from him last year, if Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy, who at 19 feels like he's been at the team forever, but he hasn't really been. but it seems like every year we talk about, that this is the year that Shaquille is going to finally break out, and we haven't seen that from him yet. If he can sort of finally get the opportunity to sort of show himself and show why he's one of the club's highest prospects, then sure, I think that's a silver lining. But those are silver linings that you really want to have. You're going to have to sort of squint to see, right? I think, again, unless there are like wholesale roster upgrades made, then I think silver linings like that are going to be really tough to see. And there's just, I think the team is potentially set up for another really, disastrous campaign potentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I got a question. You've probably been at the BMO training ground. It's still BMO, right? It's not Kia or it's got
BMO,
new naming. Yeah. What's the vibe like? Is it just a bunch of busy people being busy all the time, or is there a pervasive tension everywhere? Has it changed since the end of the season?
Since Herdman? Not really. I mean, I think there is a sense, I wouldn't call it tension. I think there is a sense of nervousness. I think there's a sense of, I don't know how to describe it. I don't think it's changed in any sort of marked way, really, Jeff, to be perfectly honest. I think, they're just...
Does that give you concern? Feeling the vibe around there? Because I mean, you're not exactly the picture of positivity right now. Granted, neither are any of us. But is that influenced it? The fact that you're not getting what you expected when you're at the training ground, you're not feeling that sunshine, happiness. I mean, from my perspective, what we're getting out of the club is a lot of telling us what to do. You need to be there on day one. You need to do this. You need to buy the ticket and take the ride. You need to be patient. You need to do this. It's a lot of sermonizing from the mountaintop. And I'm just wondering if that's carrying over to the training ground, where it's just like, like a work camp basically, or if it's just a whole bunch of busy beavers, like busying themselves with their own individual task kind of thing.
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of like the former. There's a little bit of that vibe. I mean, you have to keep in mind that, and Michael can attest to this, we only get to see the team for about 15 minutes of training. It's a small part window that we get, right? I mean, we don't get to see the entire training session. It's a small window that we're provided. So it's tough to sort of make a judgment about what the vibe is amongst the players and building when we don't see it. We're confined to our little sort of media room,
and it's prepped for you. It's a dog and pony show. But John, you have seen those 15 minutes in the good times, right?
Yeah.
So you do have a perspective, right? The 15 minutes now are undeniably an entirely different concept than the 15 minutes in the good times, right? And I think you could even glean off what the dog and pony show is now, as to what kind of control the club has over controlling its own narrative, for lack of using control in two sentences and being all alliterative. But
they've had their heads down, right? They've kind of gone about and kind of focused on the task at hand, and it's been very sort of controlling I mean, this entire preseason has been controlling the message, right? From perspective, in terms of we weren't going to originally even find out the score to games, oh my God. Yeah. Try lists listed in the starting 11 on the graphics. So, I mean, it's kind of been part and parcel of that as well. So again, I'm not terribly surprised. The club isn't, I don't think they're in a position to kind of go out of their way to sort of open themselves up to scrutiny, right? I mean, they're going to sort of play things close to the vest and sort of keep things at a distance and try to control the narrative as best they can. So, which, from my perspective, I don't entirely enjoy from a media.
I'm sure it puts you off. Yeah, exactly.
But I get it from their perspective, just considering, what's going on in the last 3 seasons, especially last year.
See, I mean, I'll tell you, I personally completely disagree with that method when you're in a market competing with the Raptors, the Leafs, the Blue Jays. They're, I mean, again, even though the club is not in a good state, the fact that they have people like you and Neil that go out of the way to show up and want to tell those stories, It's not like they're being hounded by, attack dogs when it comes to
Right.
the media in
Yeah,
Toronto.
you're
So
very respectful. It's
I
an
again,
insult. Yeah.
that's another story. But I did want to actually ask you something in relation to that. Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi. Have you
Oh, I love this question.
been able to kind of speak with them so far this preseason?
No, so I haven't. I have to admit, like in terms of like when they were down in Florida and California, like TFC was pretty good about. Like I made a weekly sort of like media request in terms of hey, I spoke to Io Akinola, I spoke to Shane O'Neill. Forget who was also on the list. There
Great
was
articles, by the way.
Thank you. There was about
they were fantastic.
There were 2 or 3 other players that were made available, and was able to speak to them, no problem. You know how it is, Michael. I mean, they always tend to protect the DPs in terms of like having them speak, to reporters, especially on a one-on-one basis. I appreciate that. Lorenzo spoke to CBS Golazzo, but I would suggest humbly that they have a much higher profile than TFC Republic, so that's probably why they let him speak to them. But no, I haven't. And to be fair, I haven't even attempted to speak to Lorenzo or Federico because what are you going to get from them? I mean, I just don't think they're going to sort of go out and say anything that's remotely kind of revealing, and they're just going to like play it safe. So
yeah, I do find it interesting that they're the Italians are speaking to media all around, aside from kind of local media. I found that it's kind of interesting, but
is it surprising though?
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
I mean,
I'm not surprised at all. What was surprising was that dude spoke Italian phonetically. Like he doesn't know how to speak Italian. Like that was like a whole thing afterward. The host of Galazzo was like, "Hey man, you speak Italian?" He's like, "Not at all." He like just memorized those questions and then nodded along. And I thought
brilliant.
that was,
So, JMO, if I can ask, do you expect then, given your initial answer, do you expect to have the Italians more available this season to speak to media? I mean, these guys they're the DPs, like you mentioned. They're in essence the face of the franchise. There's no longer Michael Bradley out there. Sure, we have Jonathan Osorio as kind of the new captain of Toronto FC, but do you expect to hear from these guys more often this season?
No. I mean, bluntly, Michael, I don't. I think it's going to be essentially a repeat of last year. I mean, you remember how often we got them. I mean, it was kind of weeks and months when we often spoke to them. And really, it was only after sort of like a game, right? If one of them did really well. I mean, when we got...
Or they wanted to shit on Bob Bradley. I don't know.
Right. I mean, when we got, at the end of season media avail, which was, pretty poorly attended, the fact that we were able to get Lorenzo and Federico, I was actually surprised by that. I mean, they were the first 2 guys up. And when like we were told that, the Italian DPs were going to speak, I was absolutely stunned because I just thought, there's no one here aside from myself and Neil. There's not really sort of anything really, there's not a big press horde like waiting to sort of to talk. So I just thought, TFC would take the easy way out and wouldn't put the Italians up. So I was surprised by that. But to get back to your question, no, I mean, I really don't think that there's going to be much change in terms of access to the Italians, especially now. I think, maybe if they start to produce and, start to live up to their DP billings, then possibly. But I mean, I'm cynic. I just tend to think it's going to be the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's fair because I mean, look, in the end of the day, if they talk to local media, the only questions they're going to be asked in a lot of ways is, why didn't you perform? Do you want to leave? What happened last year? Why did you want to get a manager out? Right? And
why is soccer different in North America than Europe? That's always thrown out in every one of the interviews, and it's always a chance.
Well, I feel like that's interviews outside of the bubble, right? Like those questions those softballs were already asked the day they got here, right? Now they're being asked real questions. Yeah, they're being asked real questions.
If I could play devil's advocate, Mike, if you roll them out, once a month, you're not getting those same questions. You might get that the first time, and that's something they inevitably are going to have to deal with.
100%. That is such a good point.
But if you build that relationship with the media, you can't ask the same question every single time. So I would argue, the other way. Just playing devil's advocate.
No, I don't think that's an unreasonable
very fair point.
thing to think, right? I think the not scary, but I guess for a lack of a better term, scary part for me is just like, look, these guys were brought in, like you said, Michael, to be the face of the franchise, right? To be the ones that take this club to the next level. And we talk about their on-field performance. We've done that a lot. But now I'm starting to think about off the field and sort of, are we actually getting our value even on that end of things, right? And because partly they're brought in for a business reason, right? Like it's partly on pitch, but a lot of it is also a business transaction in terms of growing the brand of Toronto FC. I know no fan likes to hear that word, but it's just a reality of how DPs and a lot of times work.
It hasn't been a good KPI.
That week as well. Trust me, there is somewhere at 40 Bay Street, there is somebody that's got a spreadsheet that indicates that. But, you know, to jump off that for a second and sort of maybe off the DPs and sort of think about the team in general. Obviously, look, you mentioned, John, that some of the young players are going to have to, you know, improve for this team to maybe have any kind of successful season. I want to talk a little bit more about the guys that are in the background in terms of those young players like Hugo and Mbonge, I guess not really young anymore, but Jordan Perruzza. You know, you're talking about a Kosi Thompson. You know, even Lazarus Sabanovic, you wrote a great article about why maybe we don't want to rush him yet. But where do you think those type of players are at this point? Like, are they anything on this team? Are they going to provide any real minutes? Or is it maybe time to just think about cutting bait and sort of using either, you can't really use them as trade bait. I don't know if they have any value. But, you know, is there time to cut bait on them? Because it feels like this is kind of the make or break season for especially those three.
Yeah, it's something that John Herdman kind of alluded to, like during preseason, saying, you know, the second leg of camp in Florida is going to be really make or break for these kind of players who have been on the bubble for a long time, you know, in terms of whether they're going to be regular contributors for TFC or if it's time to move on for them. So, you know, I suspect, you know, players like Hugo Mbog and Jordan Perruzza and Luke Singh, who we didn't even mention in that sort of thing, you know, possibly Kosi Thompson are either going to, you know, be tried to sold off or loaned out, you know, to, you know, whether it's European clubs or teams in the CPL. I look at a player like, you know, Hugo Mbog. He's still young, he's still a teenager, still learning his craft. I don't think you can reasonably expect him to log anything, you know, resembling, you know, serious minutes this year. Jordan Perruzza, you know, God love him, great guy, but you know, has one goal in MLS play for TFC, and that was in, I want to say 2021, 2022.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, Kosi Thompson, you know, I thought had a pretty decent rookie year, and then last year was, I'm not sure he was quite the same player, and then, you know, went to Norway, and that didn't necessarily pan out, and they didn't even sort of exercise the loan option. So I don't know. I mean, Michael, to answer your question, I really struggle to see how a lot of these sort of players who are on the periphery of the first team are going to sort of make any sort of substantive contributions this year, unless, you know, Herdman just says, look, you know, screw it. This is, you know, this year is a complete write-off, and we're building for the future, and I want to get these guys as many minutes as we can. But I don't suspect he's going to do that. I think that to some extent he will, and to some extent this is a kind of a restructuring year, but I don't think he can afford to go all in like that. I mean, he has to sort of field, you know, the strongest lineup as possible. And to be frank, his strongest lineup isn't going to include the likes of Jordan Perruzza, Hugo Mbog, or Kosi Thompson.
Yeah. All right, let's do it. Let's talk Adama Diomande, because everybody in the chat is talking Adama Diomande.
That's where we're at, where everyone's talking about Adama Diomande. That's where we're at.
Because obviously Chris Mavinga gets released from LA Galaxy, and there's a lot of noise about signing him, and then people are suddenly like trying to figure out what the waiver situation is. I'm under the impression that there's still a very good chance he's still training on his own, correct? He hasn't been incorporated into full first team training. If that's the case, let's not put him on the season-ending injury list, and we get the same roster relief we would have gotten from buying him out anyway, right?
It's not that easy, Jeff.
I'm just saying, do you see the logic in a buyout right now? What everybody is demanding.
That's a fair question.
For Diomande, you mean, or?
Mm-hmm. for Diamande. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose. I mean, look, he's on what 600,000 and change, so it's not. It's like that's a healthy sort of number, and sort of you buy him out. You not only free up that cap space, but you also free up like an international slot. So I think you could certainly make the case for buying him out, even if he is in the last year of his deal. I mean, someone said to me that to me the other day. It doesn't make any sense to buy him out when he's in the last year of his deal. But I was like, well, why not? I mean,
yeah, it's still a year to play. I mean, yeah.
Well, it's 200 grand. What difference does it make? I mean, Josie, if I recall, was in the last year of his deal as well.
Yeah.
They bought him out.
Yeah.
But I don't get the sense that they're going to buy him out. I mean, just from talking to Herdman and everything that he said, it certainly sounds like they're going to give Adama every opportunity to get healthy and to prove that what he can do, because from what John is saying, it sounds like he rates him quite highly and thinks that if he can stay healthy, which is a big if, that he can sort of be a consistent sort of contributor to this TFC side. So I appreciate everyone is clamoring for for them to buy out.
They want their pound of flesh. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'd be a little bit surprised if it happens, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. I don't disagree with anything that you said or Herdman said. I mean, he's 33 years old. He's not necessarily the oldest player. He has experience overseas. He's proven it kind of in MLS, and we did see very few, but we did see a glimpse or two of him. He's got talent to him. It's just a matter of if he can stay healthy. I personally also don't think the club has $600,000 to burn. Right, that's what's gonna
or anyone lined up that would necessitate an instantaneous move. You know what I mean?
Well, maybe they have that, but they're very much more money conscious nowadays, given what they've done the last couple of years in terms of spending. Right, I'm not saying they won't spend to their cap. I'm not saying they won't spend their resources, but going above and beyond, I've reservations about that. But it does kind of bring me to the strikers at TFC in general. We have Toronto FC has 17 strikers, it feels like, on their roster.
1,700.
I do get the sense, though, DeAndre Kerr is the guy right now to slot in as the team's starting number 9. Are you with me there, or is Prince Owosu or even Iowa Kanola, making a case there to push DeAndre Kerr for that starting number 9 role?
You're talking about Adama? I mean, yeah, I think if he gets healthy, then potentially he could push for that sort of starting spot. But I think right now it's essentially going to be DeAndre with, I think, Io as well. I think Io, you have to remember too, is someone who has a close connection with John, because John was the one who sort of courted him when he was, deciding whether to represent the U.S. or Canada. He was the one that gave Io his start with the Canadian national team. When he got injured, John didn't forget about him. Io told me that, John remained in constant contact with him during his essentially year off. So I think John sees a great deal of potential in Io Akinola and feels that he can get the best out of him. And he said at the beginning of preseason, it's the best shape that he's seen Io come into camp, like in terms of whether with Canada or the national team. And speaking, and I spoke to Io, I think
what
earlier.
An interview.
Oh, thanks. And he came out like point blank and he said, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I haven't been good enough the last 3 years. And he quite clearly sort of admitted that, this is like a big year for him because he's in the contract year of his contract. He recognizes and admitted that he hasn't been good enough and that it's on him. And so, you can't help but wonder if, that sort of self-awareness and the fact that he's come into camp in such great shape will lead to him getting, some opportunities combined with just sort of his history with John Herdman. So, I don't think anyone is kind of firmly has that number 9 rolled down yet. I mean, right now it's probably DeAndre and maybe Io is number 2. And, when Adama comes in, he'll certainly get a look. But I think it's really, the position is to be won, right? It's I don't think anyone is kind of cast in stone like a Sean Johnson as our starting goalkeeper. Jonathan Nazario is like our starting midfielder, our captain in midfield. Kevin Long is going to be our starting center back. I don't think you can say that of the forward position right now. So it's very much up in the air as far as I'm concerned.
I was always one of my favorite interviews because what you just said, he keeps it real every
Yeah.
single time. One of the best
Yeah.
interviews I think on the team.
absolutely.
Brian Abrahams gave us an interesting question. Do you think winning the Canadian Championship is a reasonable goal? I feel like that should be what we strive for this season. The caveat, of course, is that we don't have any buys because we were crap last year, so we have to do the whole gauntlet in the Can Champ, which means minutes for some of these fringe players. But the question was levied to you, John. What do you think? Think that's realistic?
I think that's reasonable and realistic. I mean, the Canadian Championship, it's not an MLS season, right? You're not playing 34 games over whatever it is, 7-month period. That's like a marathon. Canadian Championship is more of a sprint, right? And it's knockout football. So it's a completely different sort of scenario. And, you've got teams coming into the competition, whether it's the CPL or your CF Montreal and Vancouver, who, like Toronto, are going to be competing on different fronts at the same time. They're going to be going through squad rotation. Montreal is kind of in the same place as Toronto, so who knows how much they're going to sort of how much emphasis they're going to put in the Canadian Championship. So I think there's potential there. Like if they wanted to go all in the Canadian Championship, it's probably not the worst move in the world because win a trophy. It's a gateway into the CONCACAF Champions Cup next year. But so I wouldn't be opposed to that if Toronto were to do that, and I think that could be a reasonable goal. Certainly far more reasonable than getting to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Can
I be honest? I actually thought I forgot Prince Owusu existed until we mentioned him about 5-10 minutes.
Well, a lot of people forgot Cashin Mailula is also on this team.
Yeah.
I wouldn't seen hide or hair of him outside of a
Cash money,
training
man.
photo here. Yeah,
Cash money.
Yeah.
It's cash money season, boys.
Yeah, we don't know what he's going to be. John, I don't know if you guys have any other questions, but do you want to go?
One last is for me. Just overall sense of you guys mentioned it. Forgot Prince Owusu existed. Cassius Mailula. I'm curious about kind of John, your take on the buzz around the team at this time of the year in comparison to where it's been in other seasons. Do you get the sense that it's died down a little bit?
Oh, totally. Yeah. Without any question. I mean, I think back to the early days, Michael, like even like sort of like, the first few years, like 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, when, fans knew the team was crap and that it wasn't going to get better anytime soon. There was just a healthy buzz and electricity amongst like the fan base, before the season started and I think a large part of that is because of the fan experience at BMO Field, right? Because it was unlike any other sort of sporting in the city compared to, the Jays or the Leafs or the Raptors or the Argos. So I think that's a large part of it. And the sense of community that sort of developed around TFC in those early days, I think that's worn off. That is worn off. I mean, the community is still there, but I don't think it's I don't think it is what once was. I don't think the atmosphere at BMO Field is what it once was. And look, again, we're talking about a team that has been, absolutely horrible the last 3 seasons.
Horrible.
Last year was the worst season on record, and that's covering a lot of ground. And that's coming from me, who's covered the team since day one. And I can tell you, that was like the worst team I've ever sort of covered from a TFC perspective. So
was the worst moment Ami Babuka giving up on that goal for NYCFC because that haunts my nightmares.
I think in a lot of ways, Jeffrey, that was like perfectly encapsulated.
The capstone.
Yeah.
It has to have Yakety Sax as the background. Like it's just the worst thing I've ever seen.
Just mentally frail, giving up at the first sign of adversity, just sort of going through the motions, not sort of invested, not engaged. That moment was TFC's season in a nutshell for last year.
Totally agree.
So, with all of that, it's not a surprise that, that there's, I wouldn't even say that there's a buzz. I think if anything, there's just a sense of like, oh my God, what is this season going to be? Do you know what I mean? Like, forget about buzz.
Or, oh my God, is TFC actually playing on Sunday?
Yeah, I think there's
TFC have a game.
The buzz is who sells their Messi tickets for the most amount of money to some punter, and and doesn't get a callback demanding their money back when he doesn't play. Right?
I think there's just genuine dread, to be perfectly honest. I mean, just from fans.
I agree,
and I just like there's genuine dread about oh my God, like what are we in for this season after last year? So yeah, I mean, Buzz, forget it.
Well, can I maybe just jump off that really quickly? Mike, you used the word buzz. I may use the word apathy to a certain extent. Maybe not just for the people who are listening to this podcast, because if you're listening to this podcast, you're a sicko. But
Yeah, you're one of us.
You're one of us. But if
One of us.
if you're talking about people outside of that bubble, the sort of the regular Toronto sports fan who are like, yeah, I'll go to a couple TFC games a year and check it out.
One in
Are you
particular.
getting a sense that is kind of like there's a little apathy there to being like, you know what? Maybe not this season. I'll catch him another time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the lone saving grace is like the Messi factor, right? I mean, the potential that, the sort of casual sports fans who kind of tune it, watch the odd soccer game or go to the odd TFC game, the potential of seeing Messi might sort of keep them sort of, vaguely interested in Toronto FC. But, you used a great word there, Michael, apathy. And
yeah,
I think that's it exactly. Because, again, in turning back to that Mabika moment, that was apathetic, right? So the team and
you take
players,
the A out, just say pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, if there's apathy within the roster and within the team, then it's not surprising that the fans and casual supporters are going to be apathetic as well. So, I mean, I think that's just the general theme of the lack of buzz surrounding this team right now.
I'm going to call it what it is: sports trauma. I mean, it's not just the team that's suffering from it; it's the fan base. It's the fan base, and maybe make the shirts not $270 Canadian. That would help. Just yeah,
if you're getting the authentic with printing on it,
with printing on it before shipping, they're about 270 Canadian.
Wow.
You're the second person that I've seen their soul leave their body when I've made that statement in the last 2 days. Mark Hinckley had the same look as you did. He was like, "What?" And then he was silent for like 5 minutes, and I had to vamp through the whole podcast. But yeah,
Jeff, can you do a favor? Can you do me a favor? Gray's got a comment there about MLS being back. Can you just highlight that? I would do it, but I can't.
I mean, how far
Yeah.
is it? Oh, there it is.
And I will probably be the unpopular one and agree with Gray there in a sense that
let's read it. Let's read it.
Yeah.
For the
So
one.
I'm sorry, guys, but I disagree. I'm so happy MLS is back. Love the league because we don't know where anyone will finish. Not like the top leagues in MLS. Everyone has a chance to move up the table. If you listen to everybody else, Gray, it sounds like everybody can except TFC. So, but I will say this, and I had this Twitter debate with somebody the other day about, should you have optimism as a fan given how bad this team was the last couple of years and how bad it's projected to be this season. And I think from a fandom perspective, if you don't go into a season with some kind of hope, and I get it, like it's really hard to find hope this year. I 100% agree. I'm not naive to what's going on with the team and how the roster is being built and things like that. But every season does have that little glimmer of hope until it gets stamped out by week 3. But I think every fan does need that. There's a lot of fans that need to have that hope and need to have that just enjoyment of watching their team play football again. And whether you genuinely think this team can be good or just kind of watch to see how bad it could actually get, I think that's a fair thing to be excited that the team is playing football again from that perspective. And at least we'll have a couple of months of actual games to talk about. Than just sort of the snippets of headlines from here and there. So I agree with Gray on that regard. But I also get it if fans are completely apathetic and are completely, just tuned out. Because you're right, Jeff, like from an emotional perspective, there is emotional sports trauma there. Like how many times can we kind of believe and have our hearts stomped on every time by
we just got to embrace being a meme club again. I think that's the answer, is just like lean into the skid, embrace being a meme club, at least for this year, and everybody has fun out there. At least that's my intention. Yeah.
Well, I think for those who have been with this club from day one, we know what this team was before the glory times, and then you rode the wave of Javinko and Altidore and Bradley and Vasquez and that team that was literally unbeatable. And now we've seen it come back down. And that hurts. I think it hurts more than anything to see that this team kind of figured it out and then somehow lost the playbook. And that is painful for a lot of fans because it's just like we thought we were never going back there, and we just got dragged right back to hell in a sense.
Yeah, in the way that it happened, the fashion that it happened. And just to clarify, like I think, everyone who's listening to this podcast, the people who are tuning in, that wasn't really kind of the point that, we were making or the question I was even kind of getting to. Sure, maybe your fandom can tweak and alter, but, for the most part, you're going to be paying attention to what Toronto FC do. You're going to be watching most games or at least, tuning into most games. I was more so talking about, the people that, don't tune into this podcast or don't watch TFC day to day. What's the buzz around them? What's the buzz from mainstream media? I get the sense that it's nowhere close to being as relevant as where it once was, and it's not a surprise. So that's more so kind of what I was kind of touching on, because TFC, a year ago, I remember with their year and a half even with Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi signings. Lorenzo Insigne was supposed to be our Lionel Messi. Oh my God, there was a ton of buzz. There was every single day people were doing hits on the radio talking about Toronto FC during mainstream times. Now
Yep.
it's almost
There's a lot of
non-existent.
Schadenfreude. I mean, when you're a big spending club and it fails as spectacularly as it has with TFC, I mean, you see it with the MLS pundits. Like everyone loves Schadenfreude, right? And we are Schadenfreude FC right now, right? So I think that we gotta ride that wave, lean into the skid. I don't know how many times I can say it. I'm just looking forward to porchetta sandwiches, porchetta sandwiches,
Porchetta, yeah.
porchetta sandwiches. I hope they're still there for Mike Newell's sake. And hey, sell your Messi tickets and it's free TFC for the next 2 years. So there we go.
Yeah. Well, we're at that part of the show, guys, where I think we're going to go into our table predictions for 2024. JMO, I know you do not participate.
We know how much JMO loves predictions.
Yeah, loves predictions. So if you want to stay on and listen to our horribly bad predictions when we recount these in October and see how horribly wrong we were, you can. If you want to sign off, we completely understand. But yeah, I'm leaving the door open to you.
You have 5 seconds to comply.
Oh God, I'll stay on. In terms of if you're asking me for a prediction, I mean, obviously not going to make the playoffs. I don't know. I'll put them at. I'll be optimistic. I'll say 12th or 13th in the table.
Whoa,
Okay,
we got a prediction.
JMO does give us a prediction. Okay,
Yeah.
I was surprised. I know you don't love
Let's
him,
listen
so appreciate it. Okay, sweet.
Also, you
all right.
totally put JMO on the spot. What if he was just like, I want to get out of here and Loki?
Yeah.
No, I was saying
we
like,
would
I
have
was
been
giving
fine
the
with it,
door. I was
according-
giving the option. I was giving.
I mean, if
saying,
he leaves,
gotta go.
Casey won't make me laugh with the comments for in the comment thread. So it's like I'm half and half.
All right.
Who's next?
You are JPN. You go. You're next.
10th
Okay.
and
Why?
10th and
10th and okay. Why?
I actually had this written out when I did the season preview for that Red Bulls podcast, but I don't have my calculations with me. Trust me, I did some work. 10th is my answer. Because I did a points calculation and who was in 10th with points last year. So based on that spread, yeah, I'm serious on other people's podcasts. I do research and everything like that. Yeah. 10th. And
Cool.
I think we may win the Canadian Championship.
Okay,
Ooh,
10th
that's
with
a
a
twist.
V's Cup, another V's Cup in the cabinet. Okay, JPN a little.
Oh, did I say
little
V
more
Cup? I meant
optimistic.
Leagues Cup. I meant Leagues Cup. Sorry.
Oh, you mean League
Leagues
Cup?
Cup, huh?
No, I mean
Oh.
V Cup. We're toast in Leagues Cup. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Singh.
I got TFC finishing 13th this year.
Okay.
Reason being is because I don't believe that they are going to be able to score goals. And they're going to struggle to put the ball in the back of the net, right? No changes, no improvement to their number 9 position. They're banking on Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi to be the only real, creators on this roster. Through John Herdman's system, the fullbacks, the wingbacks, they can get involved a little bit more and create something a little bit more dynamically on the wing. However, I don't believe the fullbacks who are currently on the roster are necessarily the best at creating in the attacking third as well. So I do get the sense that they're going to struggle to put the ball in the back of the net. Could they improve defensively with the back 3? Absolutely. Could they keep games closer? Absolutely. So that's probably my margin of difference from being, a last place team last year to moving up slightly to 13th.
Okay, fair enough. So Michael Singh, we've registered you at 13th. And I'm not going to be too far off you. I am, I think 11th is where TFC end. And I think that is an improvement because obviously it'll be improvement in places. I kind of looked at it from look at the record, the amount of draws they had, especially in the early part of the season or the first sort of half of the season. If you look at it from that perspective, that's where I kind of said, okay, I think you can get a couple more wins out of those draws with a slightly better defending. And I say slightly, I still think they'll finish in the bottom half of defending in the league. But I don't know if they're going to concede 66, 68 goals that we conceded last year. So from that perspective, I think they can finish 11th. I can see this being a rough year for teams like DC United. I can see this being a rough year for a team like Chicago. They could be really, really good or really, really bad. So there are a couple of teams that can sort of ride that bad team wave with us in the Eastern Conference. I actually think as much as people are putting a lot of stock into NYCFC, I am not. So from that perspective, there are some teams that could be down there with us.
You know who looks like a unit? Orlando City.
Yeah,
Orlando City.
I watched them last night against Cavalry.
Oh,
and I mean it's Cavalry, so give that what it is. But no, they're solid. I think they're shield contenders.
So speedy on the counterattack. My goodness.
No, they look
ran it right
team.
down your throat. Yeah.
All right. So
Church
officially,
has them fourth.
Okay,
just
fair enough.
Just to throw it down there because we always refer to
Turds.
Yeah,
you,
we always
you
refer
keep
to
the faith,
Turds.
brother. Keep the faith.
Yeah.
So
I
J-Mo,
put a cheeky fiver on MLS Cup because we've got like Leicester City odds right now. So
is it like 8,000 to 1 or something like that?
Yeah.
Plus
So,
8,000, so 80 to 1.
It's probably going to get better actually. Maybe as the game gets closer. So J-Mo, I think you said 12th. Mike Singh 13th. I have 11th, and Mr. Nesker has them at 10. So none of us have them making the playoffs. I don't think that's a surprise.
Turts does.
Turts has them make. Well, Turts. Okay, fair enough. Turts, you have them making the playoffs. Turts, look, hey, listen. If they make the playoffs, I'll buy you lunch. It's on the record. If they make the playoffs, so there you go.
Never buy me lunch.
Well, because you don't make outlandish predictions. You're a reasonable, thoughtful man.
Mike, if you make the playoffs, we'll buy you lunch. All right.
Thank you. That's all I wanted. I have one last question for J-Mo before we start to wind this thing down. What's your concern level, or what should the team's concern level be about Lorenzo Insigne's health? It's been a weird one, kind of this offseason. He's talked about it.
Good question.
His health, but struggled with it obviously last year. What's the concern level with that?
I think there's a healthy concern. I think there's a concern. He only played, I think, 21 MLS games last year. He's the wrong side of 30. I mean, he's not 35, but he's not 30, 31 either. So, I think last year in a lot of ways it was probably a wake-up call in the sense that, there was a lot more travel involved, right? I mean, he finally understood what MLS was about in terms of the different playing services and, the grind of playing midweek games and, going to Columbus and going to, wherever else and
Houston.
Yeah. So, the different climates and whatnot. So I think there's some concern. I mean, it's interesting you raised that, Michael, because one of the things I wrote a piece today talking about what are the big questions facing TFC. And for me, and what I don't think enough people are talking about is, they have to get a handle on their injury issues, right? I mean, I can remember last year where I think it was Bob's last game against New England, and they were missing like 11 guys through injury.
Or during the Gold Cup, there was like 3 weeks of that.
Right. So, and there were other games where they were missing, 10 guys, 9 guys, guys out for long stretches. I mean, Diamanda, I don't know that he played 500 minutes.
127 minutes total.
There you go. Vasquez missed a lot of time.
We're not talking about Victor Vasquez on this show.
But so for me, that's kind of one of the big important questions that has to be answered this year, and not enough people are talking about is, can they get a handle on that? And it was something that Bill Manning talked about when they, during Terry Dunfield's introductory press conference, is that they were going to do a restructuring of the sports department and they were going to get a sports science sort of division to sort of really look into this. So presumably that's sort of been formed, and John Herdman has guys on his team with a sports science background, with the training staff and everything. So I'll be really looking on with keen interest if how healthy this team can stay this year, because they were there's a lot of reasons why Toronto FC was bad last year. So I'm not pinning it all on the injuries. Far from it. But that was kind of one small piece of it. And so I'll be really interested in watching with keen interest if they can get a handle on the injury situation and just keep guys healthy.
Yeah, I mean, Lorenzo Insigne was held out of at least to the last 2 or 3 preseason games as well.
But it wasn't because of injury or fitness, Mike. It was because tactics he knows, so he didn't have to worry about him. Right, that comes right from the gaffer himself. Yeah.
Well, it's probably of all the seasons that we've seen this club, this might be the one with the most question marks going into game 1, and frankly, the season where if you have to have everything go right for this team to be not a playoffs. Again, forget playoffs. Just to be a semi-competent football team on the pitch, almost everything has to go right. And that is a scary place to be. I think we'll wrap it up there, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to another Toronto Till I Die. A couple of favors to ask, as usual. Rate, review the show. Thumbs up, subscribe on YouTube. 5 stars if you're listening on the podcast version, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. That greatly helps people find the show and build this little TTID community that we're building. And also give us a follow on Twitter or X or whatever that app is before it dies. And then we'll have to go do it again on some other app. You can follow us at Toronto Till I Die. For Jeffrey P. Nesker, for Michael Singh, and for John Molinaro, I'm Mike Newell. See you next week.
Always a pleasure, John.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah. Cool. Just one last thing. It was a great outro. Great outro.
Nailed the outro, man. Oh,
this better be good.
You're getting back at me for the lunch thing, right?
Yeah, this better be good. This better be like the question of all time.
No. I just wanted to.
You like stuff.
Well, first, our numbers were fantastic today. The live show, you guys always tune in, very lively. TFC play a game in 3 days. We're all, as much as we're pessimistic on this show, we are looking forward to watching some soccer again. But we got to thank our guests, like Matt Doyle off the top.
Yes, absolutely.
Super big thank you for joining us, bringing some terrific insight. And of course, our favorite guest, John Molinaro, who's on the ground every single day covering Toronto FC. And I can tell you from, firsthand perspective, we're very fortunate to have people like JMO, to have people 100%. Like Neil in the position that are willing to go out and invest their time, their, effort, everything into covering Toronto FC. So go support, TFC Republic, worth every single dollar that you have. 100%. Every single dollar that you spend on that. Because like I said, it's as JMO's kind of alluded to, it's, there's not a lot of people that are doing it. So to have JMO, we're very fortunate, and have him join our show, even more fortunate. So cheers, JMO.
That's your flowers. That's your flowers, JMO. That's your flowers.
Yeah. Enjoy the flowers. Was there a question in there somewhere? I didn't hear a question.
No, that was just love. I just wanted to show him love. That's okay. That's just love.
That's how we're gonna end. That's how we're gonna end this preview show. It's just love, and come back next week, and we'll be completely miserable because TFC.
So thank you for tuning in to another Toronto Till I Die update. Just kidding. All right, why don't you do good night, everybody.
Peace.
And wait, and baby, I'm TFC till I die.